quick question about that Transient M plugin that you have
Mm-hmm.
from Native Instruments. I don't have that one, so either do you have a discount code for that, or do you have maybe another option that does the same thing, or something else that you could recommend? Like, would a de-esser do the same thing, or is that really like kind of the cream of the crop for that type of a plugin?
I don't have a discount code for Native Instruments there. I have got a whole bunch of other ones. Another option, rather than doing that, is the enveloper. Let's have a little look at this. There you go. That's basically doing the job. So
Okay.
an enveloper, I'm assuming I've never really used this, but I assume it just allows you to create an ADSR envelope with whatever is going through it, but it's not labeled particularly helpfully. But that function there, that slider there, which is labeled gain, is the attack. So
Okay.
pulling that down, as you can see there, we're shaving off the attack, which is exactly the same as what we were doing here with reducing the attack. So
Okay.
let's go with that.
Okay. All right. Cool. Thank you.
So let me get rid of that one. Cool. Okay.
Just a quick question about the compressor, the sidechain compression that you did with the kick and the bass.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any time that you would maybe consider using a dynamic EQ rather than a compressor? Like, is that just a preference of yours? Can they sort of do the same thing? I mean, I have a little bit of experience with Waves F6 dynamic EQ, and I mean, I've used that before for some side chaining, but I mean, it sounds great with the compressor, but any reason why you might choose compression over dynamic EQ?
In fact, normally I would go with dynamic EQ, and I would usually use FabFilter's Pro Q3. That's kind of my turn to, but Waves F6 would do the same thing. The reason that I would choose compression over sidechain EQ is if I don't need to do very much, if I'm just looking for something very, very gentle,
Okay.
these aren't working hard at all, so it's not really a big deal. It's not like it's a real noticeable feature. If it was in a track where everything was a bit more slammed, so in a hard rock track or in an electronic dance music track where everything's much more in your face, then some dynamic EQ might be more appropriate, where you don't want to be dipping the whole audio signal. You just want to focus on the bits where the frequency content is crossing over.
Okay.
So yeah, in that instance, I would certainly be thinking dynamic EQ rather than
Okay.
sidechain compression. But in this instance, because we weren't working it very hard, didn't really make any difference because it's not a real obvious thing.
Okay.
But totally, dynamic EQ would be absolutely fine in this application. And you do what's preferable, and you use your ear and you figure out if it's doing the job that you need it to do or not. So
Okay.
that would be totally
Okay.
fine too. Yeah.
Sounds good. Okay. I just had one final question, and it was
Mm.
about the synth bass in this project.
Mm.
When you've pre-fade metering on, it's really cranked. I mean, it all sounds good. I just wanted to kind of come back to some of those principles. Like, is that okay?
Yeah. So let's have a look at it. Yeah, the short answer is it is okay. it's absolutely fine
Okay.
because it sounds good. The
Right.
the longer answer is, if you were worried about any kind of digital distortion that is coming in because you're clipping, in the digital realm like this, it doesn't matter when you're looking at
Okay.
such a small amount, because of all sorts of complex things like 32-bit float
Sure.
and blah blah blah, that
Oh, okay.
it's
Yeah.
not that
Yeah.
necessary to know about.
Okay.
In the analog realm, if you're working on a proper console, it might bother you more, but still, a bit of clipping is fine so long as you like how it sounds. It's only a problem if you
Right.
don't like how it sounds.
Right. Okay.
So that's it's kind of up
Uh,
to you to make that call.
okay. I mean, all the principles with pre-fade metering that you've outlined really early, it all makes a lot of sense to me. I will be honest that the whole pre and post fade metering thing hasn't quite fully clicked in my brain yet.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just sort of absorbing it and listening, and I have a feeling it's gonna be one of those things where I just like wake up in the middle of the night and like all of a sudden it just makes sense. I don't want to waste your time asking questions about pre and post fade metering because I still can sort of look at the numbers and use the principles that you've taught, even if I don't fully understand just the full definitions of them. I know it just very simply, it's pre-fade metering means it's the signal before the fader,
Mm-hmm.
but
The,
yeah, that's still kind of percolating in my brain.
the explanation is really straightforward, right? So if we are in post fader metering, let's just solo out this bass guitar. When we play it, if we adjust the fader,
Mm-hmm.
the level that we're seeing will adjust with it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If we're in pre-fader, because the level that we're seeing comes before what we do with the fader, the metering won't be affected by the fader. That's all it is. So
Okay.
it helps you with gain staging, because what it means is that the numbers down the bottom, because they're not affected by the level, you can always try and match the ins and outs of plugins that you're putting, your inserts and stuff, more easily. Whereas if you then go and grab your fader and start shifting it around, it will kind of skew the numbers that perhaps you were looking at. But ultimately,
Okay.
try and get away from thinking about the numbers and think about, does it sound as I want it to
Good.
sound?
So those are my questions. So I'm ready.
Cool. Right. So let's
next steps.
jump into these keys then. Let's finish these keys off. Now we've got these two pads here, which are kind of complementary in the sense that they're joining together to make one soundscape.
Mm-hmm.
One's a bit more kind of glassy and shiny than the other, but effectively, I think we can treat them as one sound.
I agree. Okay.
So, let's just trim them a bit here if we need to. And then I think what we'll do, which we've done before, and interestingly they're actually bussed to different places, which is interesting, is bus 19. Where's bus 17? Okay, we've got pads bus over here, so let's bring that down here with our pads and let's put them both to that bus 17. So they're both coming out here now. So I think, like I've done previously with other things, I just want to try and keep the center kind of tidy to allow room for bass to come through. So
Okay.
we'll just get our channel EQ again. in dual mono, as we've done before. Put it in mid-side mode and try and keep this middle of our track tidy. Just a little bit of that same kind of shiny reverb that we've got on our keys here.
Mm-hmm.
And then beyond that, we'll just see how it sits in the mix.
Okay.
I mean, to me, for now, that's fine. You know, it's.
I agree.
As I said much earlier on, it's a pad. You don't need to know that it's there. It's just there to support an enriching.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't compress it or anything like that because I don't want its dynamic to be so consistent that it's there all the time. So I'd leave it uncompressed so that it has a bit of a swell to it.
Yeah, and I can hear that. It's just there's a slight pulse to it, which is just it's kind of gentle and nice.
So I just leave it like that for the time being.
Okay.
As we know, nothing's set in stone, but
sure,
we'll go with that. Now, to me, it's actually mostly the high end of this that I just want to kind of tuck in because it's a little bit sticky pokey.
It is. It's a little too bright.
I think that's all right for me. Then we've got this bit here. Now this part I'm not so sure about because it sounds harmonically like it's clashing a little bit, and because it's got quite a lot of energy to it, I just wasn't quite sure where it would sit in the balance.
It might not be that necessary. I kind of liked it as an effect within the like sort of the lead up to the chorus, but I mean, I'm not really missing it right now
Yeah.
with the other stuff that's happening.
I think that there's something in there harmonically that's clashing, which is
Okay.
distracting me. So
Okay.
whether we might experiment with it in the kind of lead ups to the chorus and then lose it in the
Hmm.
choruses, or maybe there's a way that you can rebounce out that track, either
Yeah.
correcting the harmony or just keeping the kind of the more
Okay.
percussive nature of it. I don't know, but let's just for the time
Okay.
being, let's leave it muted and
I
then we can
might.
come back to it.
What I could probably do too is I could just maybe make it like I could take out thirds and sevenths out of it and maybe just put in like the 1 and the 5
Yeah.
of the chords and just see if that maybe gives some. I can go back and try that out.
Yeah, by all means. Okay, so we got this riser.
And that can stay pretty low in there also. I think you can just sort of bring up some swell without it being so obviously a riser, I guess.
Yeah, I think I just tidy up high pass, low pass,
Okay.
like with most things. Just high pass in this instance, and I think rather than using that same reverb that we've got going on in this group, I'll actually just go with its own reverb because I don't want it to be quite so kind of flushed.
Okay.
Now, what did we say you've got in the Valhalla department? Space modulator, supermassive. Let's go with supermassive again, but we'll go
Sure.
with a smaller reverb, just so it's not so totally washed out. Something like that, I reckon. And then let's go to this part down the bottom here. Now this is the sort of thing I don't really want to compress it because
Okay.
I like the dynamic in it, and compressing
Okay.
it is going to suck some of the life out of that. But
Okay.
but what I would do is just make a note here. These are
Right.
all my notes, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
I would just make a note here.
And muchly appreciated notes too.
Absolutely. Automate wave space in chorus.
Okay.
Just so I don't forget that I want to
Okay.
automate the level of that rather than compressing it. I think automation will be a better way to go there, but we'll save all the automation for later on.
Okay.
And then we've got this last one here.
Yeah, that one's like
That one's like,
it's pretty loud. I think we could probably.
I think that'll do for now.
I agree.
And then what haven't we looked at? We've got these keys.
Vintage piano. Those, yeah, that's in the verse only.
Now, again, there's a question in here as to how much consistency we want to make in the dynamic, because obviously, as you can see, there's quite a range. You know, crescendo's quite a bit, which presumably is quite deliberate. So we don't want to kind of squash it so much that we lose that. But I think that's something that we'll want to kind of feel as we get into more of the automation of the mix. We just want something that's going to give us a starting point. What I would want to do is put its own reverb on there again, and I just go with the stock, and I just want some kind of hall type reverb on there. There's probably like a piano hall, something or other, dark piano hall.
Okay. I'm going to make a note to myself also. I might re-export that, not changing anything other than adding the sustain pedal back in the beginning. It might have gotten cut off when I was trimming. Just kind of like plunk, plunk, plunk in the beginning.
Yeah.
So I might re-export that as well.
Yeah, I think that's fine for now. Cool. Okay. So I'm happy with where we are so far. So
absolutely,
let's get into your vocal, which is probably what everybody in the entire world waits for. Is what do I do with the vocal? Okay. So let's trim first of all.
Okay.
Got you muted down.
On my knees, I sit with starstruck eyes. With just a touch, you lift me up on waves of blood and water, on waves of blood and water. You that pierced your side brings me to my knees. I sit with starstruck eyes.
Okay, so vocal. I'll always start with some subtractive EQ if it's required, just to tidy it up.
You that pierced your side brings me to my knees.
So looks like around sort of 180 is where I can high pass up to.
You
Okay.
that pierced your side brings me to my knees. I sit with starstruck eyes. With just a touch you lift me up on waves of blood and water, on waves of blood and water.
So the knack with high passing a vocal is that you don't want to notice it having an impact on the tone of the voice.
Okay.
So if you can A/B it and you hear that it's taking out a bit of thickness, then you've gone too high.
Okay.
You that pierced your side brings me to my knees. I sit with starstruck eyes. With just a touch you lift me up on.
To me, that's fine there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I mean, there's nothing else that's really kind of sticking out as like anything nasty that I'd want to get rid of. I don't think.
Okay.
That pierced your side brings me to my knees. I sit with starstruck eyes. With just a touch you lift me up on waves of blood and water, on waves of blood and water. You that pierced your side brings me to my knees. I sit with starstruck eyes. With just a touch you lift me up on waves of blood and water, on waves of blood and water. You that pierced your side brings me to my knees. I sit with starstruck.
Just a couple, a couple of small little things, just to gently get rid of a little bit of harshness. Now, the age-old argument of should I EQ before compression, compress before EQ? You know, it's up to you. Is the long and short of it. I think in this instance I will compress first and then EQ afterwards.
Okay.
Just because that's the way that I think I want to work this time round.
Yeah.
That's what is kind of jumping out to me. So very often I will use two compressors in serial. In series. So the first one I'll use will be some kind of 1176 type model, which is a faster style compressor, and this will be to work on the transients.
Okay.
And then, in fact, rather than using the stock ones here, because I know you've got the CLA ones, let's use the CLA.
Okay.
CLA 76, and then I'll use some kind of LA2A style afterwards.
Okay.
I'm going to go with the Bluey rather than the Blackie. So the Bluey is the original 1176 model. The Blackie is like the revision D, which is a few models later. The Bluey gives a bit more vibe. It's got a bit more kind of analog feel to it.
Okay.
The Blackie is a bit cleaner. Now, on an 1176, to the right is fast attack and fast release. So 7 is fast, which is a little bit counterintuitive. You would probably think that to the left is fast and then you get slower, but you don't.
Okay.
It has a fixed threshold, and you've got ratios here. You basically drive it and then compensate. That's all you've got. Now probably there'll be, let's give this male vocal a go. So we're going with a slow-ish attack, although it's an 1176, so it's still fast, and a fast release, 4:1 ratio.
You that pierced your side.
And I'm just going to look to grab the transient, so like 3 dB of gain reduction, no more.
You that pierced your side brings me to my knees. I sit with starstruck eyes. With just a touch you lift me up on waves.
And then the big transients, it's popping past, but I'm cool with that. Let's
Okay.
just gain
You
stage.
that pierced your side brings me to my knees. You that pierced your side brings me to my knees. You that pierced your side brings me to my knees. I sit with starstruck eyes. With just a touch, you lift me up on waves.
I think that's doing enough. And then an LA2A it's an optical style compressor, so it's much slower to act. It's much more musical, but it's very simple to use. You just choose your amount of peak reduction here and then gain compensate. So you have to kind of work right to left, which is another quirk of this model. But yeah, gain reduction and then trim. That's all we're looking for. And you can get quite aggressive with this, even up to like 10 dB of gain reduction. It's still going to sound really nice.
You that pierced your side brings me to my knees. I sit with starstruck eyes. With just a touch, you lift me up on waves of blood and water, on waves of blood and water. You that pierced your side brings me to my knees. I sit with starstruck eyes. With just a touch, you lift me up on waves of blood and water, on waves of blood and water. You that pierced your side brings me to my knees.
And then after my compression, I'll probably do my de-essing at this point. Because once you've compressed, those sibilant frequencies tend to kind of pop out a bit more. Have you got a de-esser in here that you like?
I have de-esser and then RDesser in there.
Okay. Yeah, let's go with this then.
You that pierced your side brings me to my knees. I sit with starstruck eyes. With just a touch, you lift me up on waves of blood and water, on waves of blood and water. You that pierced your side brings me to my knees. I sit with starstruck eyes. With just a touch, you lift me up on waves of blood.
7400 tends to be my magic number that I'll start at, because it tends to be a good frequency for a de-esser, and you can adjust from there. But I think in this instance, it's sounding pretty okay.
Okay.
So we'll go with that.
You that pierced your side brings me to my knees. I sit with starstruck eyes. With just a touch, you lift me up on waves of blood and water.
Now, I want to kind of try and get... No, maybe that's not the right choice. Maybe I will go to the console. Okay, so I want to boost some low end to get a bit of thickness out of your voice.
Okay.
You that pierced your side brings me to my knees. I sit with starstruck eyes. With just a touch, you lift me up.
Like that kind of thickness is what I want.
You that pierced your side brings me to my knees. I sit with starstruck eyes. With just a touch, you lift me up on waves of blood and water, on waves of blood and water. You that pierced your side brings me to my knees. I sit with starstruck eyes.
Just try and give it a bit more body, make it a bit rounder.
Okay.
You that pierced your side brings me to my knees. I sit with starstruck eyes, with just a
Bit of a high shelf, bit of air.
You that pierced your side brings me to my knees. I sit with starstruck eyes. With just a touch, you lift me up on waves of blood and water, on waves of blood.
And a bit of presence going on there. And let's have a little listen.
You that pierced your side brings me to my knees. I sit with starstruck eyes. With just a touch, you lift me up on waves of blood and water, on waves.
Sounds nice, I think. Now there's still some syllables that I'm losing a bit, but I'm not sure I want to kind of compress any more, so we'll try the vocal rider and see if this will catch those for us. Let's have a little look. Do you know this plugin?
I do, but I'm really curious to watch you use it in the context of one of my songs.
Cool. Okay.
You that pierced your side brings me to my knees. I sit with starstruck eyes. With just a touch, you lift me up on waves of blood and water, on waves of blood and water. You that pierced your side brings me to my knees. I sit with starstruck eyes. With just a touch, you lift me up on waves of blood and water, on waves of blood and water, on waves of blood and water, on waves of blood and water.
That blood, the long held note, is sounding a little bit pinned at the moment.
Okay.
But we might go and automate that, or it might be that when we put the backing vocals in, it kind of enriches it, but we'll just keep that in our mind. But that's helping for the time being.
Do you typically use slow or fast on the vocal rider, like for a song like this?
For a vocal, generally slow. You can use it on other things. You don't have to use it on a vocal. For example, if you had a guitar solo, you could stick it on a guitar solo. And on something like that, where perhaps the transients are a little bit more present, a faster response could be better. But yeah, slow is normally fine. So let's go with that, and then let's look at some reverb and delay. Let's go with our delay first of all.
You that pierced your side brings me to my knees. I sit with starstruck eyes. With just a
Now I don't want to delay it noticeably. I just want to use it to kind of thicken.
You that pierced your side brings me to my knees. I sit with starstruck eyes. With just a touch, you lift me up on waves of blood and water, on waves of blood and water. You that pierced your side brings me to my knees. I sit with starstruck eyes. With just a touch, you lift me up on waves of blood and water, on waves of blood.
It's, you know, it's definitely thickening, isn't it? It kind of feels
Yeah.
fuller.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll go with some reverb. Now I reckon we can just go back to the R-verb because that was nice and kind of transparent.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You that pierced your side brings me to my knees. I sit with starstruck eyes. With just a touch, you lift me up on waves of blood and water, on waves of blood.
My general goal with a reverb is to have it decay in between phrases. So if it hasn't yet finished decaying by the time the next phrase comes in, it's too long.
You that pierced your side brings me to my knees. I sit with starstruck eyes. With just a touch, you lift me up on waves of blood and water, on waves of blood and water. You that pierced your side brings me to my knees. I sit with starstruck eyes. With just a touch, you lift me up on waves of blood and water, on waves of blood and water. You that pierced your side brings me to my knees. I sit with.
Now I will tend to keep the lead vocal not too wet. Some people would put on a whole load more reverb than that. But I like to keep it quite present, quite forward, because obviously the more reverb you put on, the further back it goes into your mix. And that's, to me, kind of counterproductive. The BVs, I'll slather a whole load more reverb on. But the lead vocal, I want to keep it, you know, up front, because it's what I want to hear the most.
Right.
That's my thinking, at least. And then we've got this ending accent, haven't we? So I'm going to be real lazy, and I'm going to copy the channel strip settings.
That's fine.
And I'm going to paste them over.
And that probably at the end, because it's just an accent, that probably can be, if the background vocals are here, that could probably just be like just on top. I don't think it needs to be out here.
So that I'll put more. Now this region was wildly louder than the other, so I had to go back to the compressors and readdress. But you know, the rest of what we've done applies. You know, the EQ is still the same.
Absolutely.
So you know, we can go with that for now. Cool. Okay. How do you like the sound of that? Is that sounding?
That sounded pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Great. Okay. So let's take a look at your BVs then. So we've got kind of two loads, haven't we? We've got this lot. Now, I'm not going to do anything individually to them because that would, one, take up a hell of a load of CPU, which is pointless, and two, take up way too much time. So I'm going to create a new bus. I'm going to bus them together, and I'm going to treat them as one.
Okay.
BV bus 1. I'm going to make sure it's going to bus 26 over here. I'm going to go and color code. Cool. And then I'll get into it. And I'm going to treat them all as one.
Okay.
So the high pass point is very clear. It's like around 200. Now you can get away with having your filter points higher and lower on BVs because they don't need to be as full as a lead vocal. So we can go a bit higher with the filter.
Okay.
So that is shaving a little bit of body off, but I'm all right with that.
That's fine.
Just a touch, you lift me up on wave, blood and water on wave. Ooh, ah. Ooh, ah, ooh.
Cool. Here, I think I am going to go with the EQP.
Just a touch, you lift me up on wave, blood and water on wave. Ooh, ah. Ooh, ah, ooh, ooh. Just a touch, you lift me up on wave,
So just getting a bit of kind of body, a bit of thickness, and then kind of high end kind of air shininess. And then I'm going to compress these things together.
Okay.
Now you have got the Fairchild. What was I looking for? I was looking for
Fairchild, you said?
Yeah, which is the Pug or Pwig. Okay, this kitty. Now, this just sounds lovely, and it's really good for gluing things together. So let's just.
Just a touch, you lift me up on wave.
You don't need much gain reduction in the Fairchild because it's quite strong. So if you're getting like 1 to 2 dB of gain reduction, it's doing quite a lot.
Okay.
Just a touch, you lift me up on wave, blood and water on wave.
Sounds lush. Let's get rid of the sends here, and let's put them on here. Go to 24. Go to 25. Okay, now on the verb, I'm going to want something bigger. So we might try the Valhalla again.
Okay.
Stereo verb on a stereo bus.
Just a touch, you lift me up on wave. Just a touch you lift me up on wave. On wave. Blood and water on wave. Ooh, hear that pierce your side. It brings me to my knees. I sit with starstruck eyes. With just a touch you lift me up on waves. On waves. Blood and water on waves.
Now I actually need to de-ess that after this reverb because it's getting quite
Sibilant.
essy. So let's have a little look at that.
On a wave, blood and water on wave. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Just a touch you lift me up on wave. Ooh, just a touch you lift me up on wave. On a wave. Blood and water on waves. On waves. Blood and water. Blood and water. Hear that pierce your side. It brings me to my knees. I sit with stars.
Cool. And then I would look to just very gently glue those things together in the vocal bus to bring the whole vocal together a bit more.
Okay, so
Go on.
that's lead and backgrounds on that bus. Let's at all the vocal. Okay.
All the vocals. So just to pull all the vocals together a bit.
Okay.
Pierce your side, it brings me to my knees. I sit with starstruck eyes. With just a touch, you lift me up on waves, on waves. Blood and water on waves, on waves.
And you hear how, because the lead vocal is coming in higher, it's then helping to bring the backing vocals underneath the lead vocal.
Yeah.
Hear that pierce your side, it brings me to my knees. I sit with starstruck eyes. With just a touch, you lift me up on waves, on waves. Blood and water on waves, on waves. Blood and water, blood and water. Hear that pierce your side, it brings me to my knees. I sit with starstruck eyes. With just a touch, you lift me up on waves, on waves. Blood and water.
Cool. And then I'd do a similar thing with this other set. It might be that we can kind of basically duplicate our settings over. So, fresh bass.
Okay. I do have a quick question. This was one I meant to write down and I didn't, but I think it'll apply really at any point. Some of the changes that you've made over the course of this whole project have really given a lot of nice brightness to the whole thing. I've noticed if you just have somebody else's sort of standard default mastering presets on something, it often brightens things up. The high end usually becomes kind of crispy. So is that something that just whoever's mastering it would just sort of need to be aware of? Like, okay, this already has a good bit of brightness. We don't have to bump this up more in brightness when we go to, when it's mastered.
Yeah, totally. You've basically done a bunch of that already, and when that goes to a mastering engineer, that they're not going they're not going to put more on if it doesn't need it, or a good
Right.
one. A good mastering engineer won't.
Right.
So these settings that we've done, particularly here with the console EQ on our instrument bus, that was doing a lot of that kind of brightening. So yeah, a good mastering engineer wouldn't kind of just stick more on just because that's what they'd normally do.
Okay.
Absolutely.
On wave, blood and water, blood and water. On wave, blood and water.
I never dialed in my delay, I've just realised. So let's get some delay going here.
On wave, on wave,
And that is roughly where we're at now.
Yeah.
To me, that's like a first kind of pass through everything. That's like getting everything in a good place to then go through the whole mix meticulously and automate stuff.
Okay.
It's not like I don't think I'm gonna need to go back to a compressor and start tweaking compressor settings. I'm unlikely to need to do too much more EQing. Mostly now, I'll be bothered about going through and is stuff loud enough? Is it too loud? Is it too quiet?
Okay.
So most of what I'll do subsequently will be automating stuff, either automating levels or automating probably effects sends. So it might be that at one point I've got too much reverb or too much delay,
Sure.
so I'll go in and automate those things. But most of the hard work at this point is kind of done. So next session we'll be having a bit of an automating session, I reckon.
Okay. That sounds good.
Yeah.